Hello and welcome back to Business Sparks with Val. Today, I'm going to ask you a simple question, and that is, are you also the kind of person that feels incredible sense of cringe when thinking about selling to people? And if you're someone that says, I'm just not good at sales, I'm not a salesperson, selling to people just feels completely unnatural and it's so not me, this episode is for you, my friend, because despite my many years in sales, I also used to be that person. And it took me quite some time to actually get over that hill of thinking, sales is just so icky. I think that sales is a completely different thing than, Wolf of Wall Street. So in today's episode, I'm just gonna debunk the idea of sales that you have. So let's get started. You're listening to Business Sparks with Val, the podcast for expats and internationals who are done overthinking and are ready to build their business on their own terms. I'm your host, Valeria Kadelsky, business coach and founder of Spark Coaching with Val. Each week, I will bring you tips, learnings, and honest conversation so you can build with more clarity, more confidence, and a lot less second guessing. Let's get started. What is a salesperson? I bet that something in your mind is telling you that a salesperson is sleazy, maybe pushy, maybe you're picturing it as a white male. I'm not sure, but I'm just putting it out there because that's sort of like from the TV and the media. When we think about a salesperson, we think about a, very aggressive personality that is usually a man and is usually privileged and is usually trying to convince someone to buy something from them they might not even need. The first thing I want to do is to shift this idea of a salesperson that you may have and bring it to something that feels closer to who you actually are. So before I get to that, I want to share an example from one of my clients, but actually this could be any of my clients because I think majority of the people I started working with has this same conception of selling and who is a salesperson and how they did not identify with that person. But let's bring the example of this one client I had. And she was like, I will never be able to get clients in a way because I'm not a salesperson, because I'm not that kind of person. And that kind of person is not someone that I respect. And I agree that you cannot become someone that you don't even like. And I want to offer you a different view on this because I think that selling and being a salesperson has very, very little about convincing and a lot more about being curious. And I bet that you, as I am, as many of my clients are by nature a curious person. If you weren't a curious person, you wouldn't even be here trying to build your own thing, right? From something that is completely different than what you know before. So the main difference here is that convincing assumes that the person that you're talking to and trying to sell to does not already want what you have to offer. And so your job as a salesperson is trying to change their mind into wanting something they might not even be interested in or need. And that's where the whole pressure around having to convince and like being pushy comes from, because the work is on you to actually get to the person to change their mind. But if instead of convincing, we shifted to listening and asking questions and really being curious about what is that made that person reach out, or like what is that person challenge and what they're facing, then the whole perspective shifts, right? Because you're generally interested in what the person is experiencing and you haven't yet decided, mind me, you haven't yet decided that what you're offering is actually the perfect solution for where that person is. There is also a difference between curious with an end goal in mind. So you're curious, but you're asking directive questions to lead the person to tell you that what they actually need is what you're offering. That is also not good selling. Good selling is being generally curious and asking open-ended questions so that the person can dive deeper into what their real need is. And if, and only if, you actually find out that what they need is exactly what you offer, that's when you suggest your solution. The reason why I'm mentioning this is because, again, that removes that pressure of you having to perform and having to solve the problem for that person. So then the whole thing becomes a natural conversation with someone rather than a performance and you trying to impress. That puts you also into a whole different vibe that the person can perceive, because they're just happy to have a conversation with another human being and sharing what they actually go through and think, oh, maybe, this conversation might be helpful for me as such. And they are more willing to share with you information that then in turn can help you propose a solution that indeed can help that person. I think the important part here is that the goal is not to get a yes at all costs. You are enabling the person in front of you to be able to make a choice for themselves. And that choice can be both yes or no. But if you also don't have the conversation, so if you don't allow that exploration to happen, you're also depriving this person for a possible solution to one of their challenges and one of their problems. And I mean, you are out here selling your service or your product to help people succeed in what is that they do. So if you don't put it in front of them, you deprive them of that option. It's their choice to decide whether what you offer is needed or not. So their responsibility on the sale is not on you, it's on them. Your only responsibility is to get curious, to ask questions, to be genuine, and to allow for that interaction to happen. That's it. You need to create the space. That's all that sales, good sales, is. Selling is service. And I think that when you shift this whole perception of selling from, again, having to convince, having to perform, having to show off what you have and just like shove it into people, to getting curious, taking that conversation, making space to understand the person in front of you genuinely, and then offering your solution as a clear next step from where they are, leaving them with the choice of whether they want it or not. It is like an entirely different experience, both for the person in front of you, who will, by the way, remember that interaction, even if they say no, as a positive interaction with a human being, and for yourself, because all of a sudden there is no need to be afraid or feeling uncomfortable or cringe about the idea of selling, because again, you're not doing anything other than just having a conversation with someone. I was very lucky that in my career, I had some sales mentors that were extremely good at selling and like this human aspect of selling. And so from the very beginning, the way I was introduced to sales was very much a service. You're offering your time and space to someone else to understand what their real needs and pain points and challenges were, to try and help them with that. That's something that I carried with me throughout all of these years and I perfected over the years. And then when I shifted to having my own business, it proved extremely vital for me to have this approach, because if I was someone like many of my clients that come to me and have never experienced sales because maybe they come from a different background, then there is a shift, this shift that I talked about, that needs to happen before we even try to approach that. Because if that's where your mind is at, no tactic, no sort of framework can help you if your head is telling you this is something you need to reject because it just feels like uncomfortable and not like you and unsincere. So that is the first step to take to try and shift your view over what selling actually is. And then the other thing is that whenever I'm in a sales conversation with a client, I never start with proposing what my program is, I usually do that in the very last, let's say, 5 to 7 minutes of the conversation. 80%, or maybe even more, like 90% of the conversation is literally me asking questions, is me trying to understand where the person's at, where's their mind, what is that they've tried before, what worked, what didn't, if they had experiences with other coaches and like what was good about it, what was bad about it, trying to understand really where they're meeting me at this very point in time. And then I ask them, based on everything they've told me, do you want to hear how I approach it or how we would approach it together inside my program? And if they say yes, and only then I proceed to explain how I would approach it and what the solution is that I suggest. If they say no, that is perfectly fine. And that was just a wonderful conversation. And I still leave them with some very valuable next steps that they can take and then they can work on their own. You always want to leave the person you talk to better than how you found them. And I know this is a cliche sentence, you might have heard it before, but it's even more important in the sales conversation because you don't want the person to leave thinking, oh my God, they just pitch slapped me for, I don't know, 30 minutes and they didn't even understand what is that I really needed and what my actual challenge was. And they will just remember that that experience wasn't great. If instead you again let them talk and let them explore, then they will remember, oh my God, this was very useful for me. And I understood things about it that I didn't know before. And so I'm in a better place than before this conversation. And that increases your chances of a sale big time, even after you've had the call. The other thing that I would say is that don't be afraid by the end of the conversation to have the clear ask for the sale. And that's the only part where you can be a little bit more direct about it, because after all, you're not just having conversations with random people on the street. You're actually talking about what is that you're offering. So after you've explained what is that you do, I would always suggest to really clearly ask, is this something that would work for you? Do you think I'm the person that can help you with this? Are you committed to taking the next steps together? Do you have the budget and finances in place to make this work? Do you need to talk to someone? Great. What is that you need to talk to them about? What will you tell them? What kind of information do you need to make that decision that is either yes or a no? And so that is also a service because you allow the person to not stay in this limbo. It's a better way to end things for you and for them because there's no extra time waste because time is money. We're all very busy. We all have things to do. So that is also you servicing the other person. And this is exactly the same things that I tell my clients. And then, of course, we do practice and we do look at what else is there that can help with the sales, like before, after the call, or, if you sell online, like what kind of wording you need to use. But this aspect about shifting that mindset from what selling actually is the first and most important step. And it took me a lot of years of practicing and learning by doing. And I've lost a lot of sales in the years because of the way that I was handling the conversations, either because I wasn't asking enough questions or because in my head I was too pressured on performing rather than listening and paying attention to people's words. I lost sales because I didn't ask at the end of the call, like, okay, what are the next steps? What do you want to do? So many aspects. And I think it's really important for me to put them out there and for you to listen to these and also know that it does take time and practice. So your first sales call will not be perfect, nor will be the second, nor the third. But I really, really suggest you putting yourself out there with this mindset of less pressure on yourself. Like you don't have to deliver anything at that point because the person is not even your client. You're just needing to be open and curious and really just find that middle ground and see if your guys are a match for what they need and for what you have to offer. That's all you have to do. If you've listened to all of these and you're still like, yes, Val, this is all good and well in theory, but I seriously have no idea how to approach the conversation, not even where to find people to talk to. Well, this is exactly what I help people with inside my program, Spark Your Expat Business. I'm going to leave in the show notes both the link to book a free 20-minute call with me to explore where you're at, and also the link to apply to my program if you think that this is a good fit. I only take a max of 2 people per month. So this month, I only have 1 spot left. Thank you for listening to the episode today. And I would love to hear from you. What is your perception of selling? And if I missed anything, so please subscribe, comment, reach out to me on LinkedIn, and let's have a chat. Thank you for listening to Business Sparks with Val. I hope today's episode sparked something for you. You can find all my resources, book a free clarity call, or explore working together at sparkcoachingwithval.com. And if this episode was useful, leave a review or share it with someone who's building their own thing abroad. Until next time, your business is waiting. Go make it real.